I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America. Because we have a public hearing scheduled at 7:30 this morning, we're going to move that ahead on the agenda. And so we'll move right to that. We'll move that ahead of the consent agenda. This is for a conditional use permit for Quas. Because we have a public hearing scheduled at 7:30 this morning, we're going to move that ahead on the agenda. And so we'll move right to that. We'll move that ahead of the consent agenda. This is for a conditional use permit for Quas. Because we have a public hearing scheduled at 7:30 this morning, we're going to move that ahead on the agenda. And so we'll move right to that. We'll move that ahead of the consent agenda. This is for a conditional use permit for Quas. Because we have a public hearing scheduled at 7:30 this morning, we're going to move that ahead on the agenda. And so we'll move right to that. We'll move that ahead of the consent agenda. This is for a conditional use permit for Quas. Because we have a public hearing scheduled at 7:30 this morning, we're going to move that ahead on the agenda. And so we'll move right to that. We'll move that ahead of the consent agenda. This is for a conditional use permit for Quas. Because we have a public hearing scheduled at 7:30 this morning, we're going to move that ahead on the agenda. And so we'll move right to that. We'll move that ahead of the consent agenda. This is for a conditional use permit for Quas. Because we have a public hearing scheduled at 7:30 this morning. Are we set to go? All right. Anyway, it's a conditional use permit for Quas Creek Dental property. Who's leading the discussion this morning? Good morning, Phil.
Okay, as the chairman said, we have a conditional use permit request for a new dental office. And this will be located on the corner of County Highway P and County Highway NN in the town of West Bend on the northwest corner of that intersection. The office will be within the Shoreline zoning district in Quas Creek, which will be just to the north of the new dental office. And the access to the dental office will be off of County Highway NN. The County Highway Department is aware of this request and is addressing it. The project itself will be only in the Shoreline zoning district, will not be in the floodplain or wetland. It will meet the minimum setback to the creek of 75 feet. And we do have, as part of the plan, they have developed a stormwater management plan to deal with the runoff from not only the building, but the parking area that goes along with the dental office. We've been working, the Land Use Division and the Land and Water Conservation Division have been working jointly to try and address the shoreline zoning issues and the stormwater issues. And at this point in the project review, we do not have any concerns. I should mention that the amount of impervious area proposed with the project is going to be 27%, which exceeds the 15% limit. But since they're going to have a stormwater management plan, that will address the amount of impervious area being over 15%. So that satisfies the code requirement for dealing with the impervious area. So the recommendation from the Land Use Division would be to approve the conditional use permit as long as the maintenance agreement for the stormwater treatment be recorded at the Register of Deeds, and that the sizing calculations for the rain garden and bioretention are submitted to the Land Use Division. That's what I have, Mr. Chairman.
Any points of discussion? Yes, Supervisor Gallantz.
Thank you, Chair. So, excuse me, Phil, when I'm looking at the, I don't know what slide number this is, 8 of 10, it talks about, my question was regarding the treatment. So what is, I guess, meant by treatment? We've had some of these requests before, but I guess I never understood what the definition is. I see there's wash stoning, there's a pre-treatment bay. So my assumption is everything that's been proposed will meet that definition of treatment.
Yes,
Okay. And then the maintenance plan. So the petitioner is being asked to submit to you what that maintenance plan is, and you're going to review it and verify that it meets our expectations or standards.
yes, that's correct.
Okay. And I'm trying to remember if in the motion, do we need to include that, or is that already in the application?
I would ask the committee to include it in their motion.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the supervisors or anyone in the audience today? If not, at this point in time, I'd entertain a motion and a second to approve the conditional use permit as presented. I'm sorry. All right. Do we need to have a motion to close? All right. At this point in time, then we'll declare the public hearing closed and entertain a motion and a second to approve the conditional use permit. Is there a motion?
I move to approve with the addition of the maintenance agreement for the stormwater treatment recorded with the Register of Deeds per staff's recommendation.
Second by Supervisor Boltman. All in favor, say aye. All right, thank you. With that, then let's move back to the consent agenda. I'd like to entertain again a motion and a second to accept the consent agenda items as presented. Supervisor Schulteis. Is there a second? Supervisor Boltman. Any discussion or questions on any of the consent agenda items? With that, then entertain a motion then to approve or vote, please. All in favor, say aye. Opposed? There being none, we'll move on to the discussion items. First item on the agenda is Chapter 275 Process and Response Memo.
Yes, thank you. We went back and forth with putting this on consent agenda or offering it as an opportunity for discussion. We did provide a, is that me? Oh, okay. We did provide a memo, which essentially was after the last meeting, we went back at the staff level and with our council and sort of discussed each of the areas that were brought up. And then the memo kind of included where we believe we would be at. And there was some additional changes that we would work into a final draft of the ordinance. We have, and you might have noticed on your agenda, that we have tentatively planned the public hearing on this ordinance for 6:00 p.m. next month. So your regular standing meeting would move to the evening that day, as well as any other business that you would have. So for those of you in the audience, if you heard that too. I'd be happy, or we would be happy, I know Paul and Phil worked on this as well, to answer any additional questions that you have. I do see that Supervisor Krebs is not here. I did talk to him yesterday about this item to see if he had any additional questions or comments, and it was mostly related to the stuff that we had already talked about. He didn't say he didn't have anything new. He just felt strongly about the boathouse wall issue, was what he had talked to me about.
Any questions or comments this morning? Then I guess at this point in time, we'll proceed according to your procedures. All right. Next item would be the park pass violations.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. So this item came up during the budget meeting, and County Executive Josh asked that we take a look, and our office staff explain to you how a little bit in more detail about how we are operating related to our park pass violations that we're sending. So we do have Eric Hyde, who's our Parks and Trails manager, as well as Deb Silsky, who helps handle our office staff, are in the audience if we have questions on this item. But so we did include in your packet sort of what the notice looks like, what the current letters looked like, and then also what the violation or the citation would look like should we have get to that point in the process. And then on page 4 is where I think you really see some of the data on the bottom about how many purchase a violation pass, how many we dismiss, how many citations are issued. And I will note, and our attorney can comment on this too, of the citations issued, the majority of those are also dismissed. So that doesn't show here because once they go to citation, they go out into the courts, but then a lot of those are also dismissed at that level. If you kind of follow that. So our statistics that we provided is all what happens within our office. And so that number, the citations issued number, where we had 33 from July 3rd through July 28th in 2019, 15%. Of those, that's not the amount of people that pay the citations. A lot of those citations are then negotiated in the court, or Brad ends up dismissing them at his level. So I did hand out, and this was not in your packet because we do call this internal notes, but a little bit about the customer service side of how we handle these. And the second page is a draft script. So we talk a lot with the office staff about how to handle these types of calls consistently when people call about parks, knowing that it's our interest to turn them into park customers, and also to basically retain them through the process of, in what we hope to happen, have them buy a park sticker or a violation park sticker, return to the parks, and become a customer in future years. So I'd be happy to answer any questions you found with the data in your packet or the process, but really this is an educational type item that we wanted to provide so that you could kind of take a look at what's happening with the park enforcement within the parks.
I have a question. I'm confused. It says, and it was highlighted in the report here, do not purchase a regular annual pass. A violation park pass must be purchased at the link above in order to dismiss the violation. And then today in the script you provided, it says, because we value you as a customer, we are willing to dismiss your violation if you're willing to pay the $5 daily park admission. I'm confused. What's the process? They pay the $5 or they pay a $50, or they can buy a park pass for the year at that point in time, then they're covered. I'm not clear on how exactly that works.
Right. So this is original. So the number one thing we would like to do is have them purchase a violation pass or a annual pass. They're the same thing. It's just a matter of how we track the revenue, because the violation passes are slightly more expensive, and that is so that we don't have people just waiting to get caught. That's a new concept we're trying out this year. We did not do that last year when this was originally developed. So that is go-to first. We want you to buy a violation pass or just take care of this, sell an annual pass in hopes that they'll return and enjoy the parks. There is also an option. So if you kind of the hierarchy to just say, somebody might say, I don't want an annual pass. I shouldn't have gotten fined because I was there because I was picking my kid up from soccer, but then we went down to the beach. We didn't realize that we couldn't cross soccer with beach activities. And so the staff has an option to say, okay, it sounds like there was some misunderstanding. Why don't we sell you a $5 daily fee and dismiss the violation? And then there's also the option, which in that case, they probably would take the dismissal completely option just because it's $5. So there is that option. I would say they use the $5 daily pass sale option the least, because people just tend to either they shouldn't have got a violation, believe they shouldn't have got one, or they recognize they were in the park, they were using the park, and they're able to make that annual pass sale because they had just received a violation. So then coming back with the park pass, people seem to think that that's a fairly fair solution and are, I wouldn't say happy, but um, they, that seems to help solve, if you look at the percentages, a good chunk of the issue or a good chunk of the violations. 54% are purchasing those passes once caught by the cameras.
What's the general attitude when we make the phone call? And obviously we've got whoever's making the phone call has got quite a bit of discretion to use here, makes him make a decision at the point. What kind of general attitude are we receiving at the other end? Are they surprised that the county's calling them? Are they expecting it? Are they upset? Or are they really, oh, I'm really, really sorry, I didn't pay attention or I forgot about it? I mean, what's the general attitude?
Typically, so the violation pass purchases, a lot of people will go online and take care of that themselves. So I think you have a couple things right away when the violations go out. The calls coming in those first few days are usually one of two things. Usually, I didn't think I should have had to pay for some reason. And so they fall into that dismissal category because someone is calling with, I was there with 4-H, or the sheriff's office was doing a training and we were out in the park and we didn't understand. And those people are usually start out with practical. They feel they have a legitimate reason why they should not have gotten a violation. And then there is the majority of people who feel like, oh yeah, I knew about that and I should have, and I just got caught. You can imagine what that feels like as a patron, and they're the ones purchasing the violations or just curing them, or sometimes calling to try to take care of that. And if you even, the percentages, I think, do a pretty good job. I would say about, if you look at the 2020 June numbers, the ones purchasing the violation pass, the 66%, I think they're just, okay, we got caught, $10, that's not great. The dismissals, those people are generally, they can be angry if they don't understand that we're trying to work with them, but they're usually quickly diffused by our staff. They do a really good job answering those calls. And then they dismiss their violation. So they might be like, well, that was, have a thought, but they're generally pretty happy. And then those citations, that 11% showing in 2020, they don't call at all, right? Those are the people who get these letters or get the notice and ignore it, essentially. Because typically if they call, we do everything in our power to prevent it from going to citation, right? So those are just kind of the no-shows. So, I mean, there's less angry. I mean, Deb might have an opinion on that. Eric deals with some. We haven't had any this year that have risen to my level. This year, last year, yes. So you can kind of, every once in a while, we get somebody who just really feels passionately that they shouldn't have gotten it, or they don't like our system, or the signage is poor, or something like that. But I haven't had any this year come to me.
Supervisor Gallants.
Thank you. I'm looking at the data here, 2019 versus 2020 violations by park, as well as violations by county. No surprise that Washington County residents are high there. Does that prompt us to think about why that's occurring? Do we need different education of folks, or to Supervisor Barry's point, are people just saying, you know what, I'm gonna thumb my nose at because I don't agree with having to pay to go into the park? So is that driving some of the high Washington County percent of violators? And then, the other piece is, what do we learn about the parks? So why is it that YAR 2 years in a row is the highest percent of violators? So is it people in the area that again feel that they don't need to pay to use that? Or is there not clear signage or whatever? So I'm just trying to understand, what can we learn from the data to reduce the violations? Because you're right, those just, you got the mix, those that are thumb in the system, and those that say, geez, I didn't realize it. My apologies, I'll pay it right away. So is it clear signage? I was just at, which one was it? I'm trying to think of it. Heritage Trails last night, and driving in there, I mean, yeah, you got a small a little thing there in real small print that says annual holders don't need to stop here. And well, it's not manned anyways. So point is, what can we learn from the violations, where they're occurring, what percentages, and does it help us determine how to solution it, either informational or signage or et cetera.
Yes, thank you for those comments.
Any other comments or questions regarding them? Yes, Supervisor Schultes.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I'm just curious, building on Brian's comments, what amount of time is spent on the staff, on behalf of the staff, going after these? Is that a?
Eric, do you maybe think you might be able to answer that a little better than I can?
Sure. So generally, at the end of each month, we'll go through it. So we'll pick 1 to 2 days per week in each park. We'll download that from our office. So download it from cameras, download all that data, and then we'll basically go through, verify all the plates are actuals, and we'll cross compare against all the data, all the bank codes into our system, and that gives us the list of basic violators who have gone in the park and not paid or entered a bank code for whatever reason they have. At that point, that process takes about 4 to 6 hours. And then after that, we have to go within each individual plate. We have to go onto the DOT database, look up the license plate, get the address. So that generally takes, it depends on how many violators there are, but in most cases, that'll take in summer, it'll take about probably about 16 hours for someone to go through about 600 to 800 license plates and send them out. So that's what per month it takes. And then you have to add in how many phone calls and stuff you get. That gives you a little better idea of how long it takes.
Thank you.
Now having 2 years under our belt with this, Jamie, do you feel the system is operating the way it was envisioned to begin with?
Yes and no. I think, Eric and I talked a little bit yesterday in Deb about the process of continual improvement. Even as it relates to the customer protocols, we're currently looking at, refining that, working through those scripts again for training purposes. So improving on that. The cameras we have talked about with IT about how we can possibly streamline the downloads and matching. Are there opportunities there? And even the by park stuff. So I think that the answer to that question is, I think it's working how we envisioned. And we still need to be having conversations about how that continues to evolve as we move forward.
Coming back to Supervisor Gallett's suggestion, I think, at least from the West Bend News standpoint, we've gotten some good exposure, I think, on the barns in particular. Perhaps as we go into spring of 2021, could we perhaps maybe push for a little more public information, whether it's news releases? I'm not sure what the media would be, but to tout the fact that, hey, we got the parks. These are all some of the great improvements, particularly going into the 2021 season. People are going to the parks, what they're going to see, what's changed, what's been improved, and just, what a great experience can be, all for the low fee of X dollars. For a family, you can come as many times as you want to. You can go to swim at the R as many times as you want to for a very nominal fee for year round. And again, and perhaps maybe relook at the signage. We got an awful lot of information on those welcome signs when you come into the parks. Perhaps there's some way to compress or consolidate that down to larger type in some cases. Just look at the signage. Are we communicating as well as we need to be? Someone's coming in with a family, with a car full of kids, and they want to get to the beach. Mom's distracted. Does she really have time to read all the information there? Or is it 2 or 3 bullet points, tells them everything they need right at the top of the sign, and then they can proceed and to go in. again, I commend, I think it's wonderful, the usage we're getting out of the parks. They're phenomenal facilities. And the fact that this year we can literally take the park system off the tax roll, I think is a great statement on the usage of the parks. The fact that we've got some beautiful park facilities, and I think we should all be proud of those. And let's just move forward to another year. Any other discussion points? Yes, Supervisor Gallons.
Thank you. Just one last one. I couldn't help notice that the county's fee is more than the state fee for an annual pass. And I don't know if we've heard any feedback from constituents on that.
We did originally. I know that the county executive has that on his radar as well. I think part of when we originally set the fee, the state is constantly in talks about increasing theirs. And when we originally had set that fee, I think it was 4 years ago now, we had talked about how we didn't want to be in a position in the short term that we would be recommending raising the fee. And so we were going to take a hit for having a fee going from 0 to something. And so we set it, especially considering the disc golf courses and disc golf fees out of Milwaukee. We looked at not only, what the state's doing for annual park stickers, but also what people pay for other things, and followed some guidance out of the survey we had done. However, I think in the budget address, County Executive Shulman mentioned that he's looking at challenging this team during sort of the planning processes of how we go from fiscal sustainability to, that next level. And that includes not only looking at all costs and maintenance and what we're doing in these parks, but I think also there's a desire to really take a look at what we're doing for revenue and how we can, what the future may hold for that exact concept. I just think we weren't quite ready to be in a position, being the first year where we won't be supported by the property taxes, to make that type of a recommendation or further vet that at this time.
Also, when we set the 30, we looked at Waukesha County too, which has had park passes since basically the inception of their park system. So that matched theirs directly too. They were at $30. They went up to $32 a year ago. We talked about following that because since we brought in park passes, one of the ideas was that we would try to look at some point of having reciprocity with Waukesha County. So that basically Waukesha County pass, they will use Washington County parks, vice versa. Washington County residents that bought a park pass would be able to go to Waukesha County. So have a bigger thing for that.
Thank you, everyone. Any other comments or discussion points? With that, then we'll move on to the action items. Again, on these, we'll take them one by one. We'll need a motion and second on each to open the discussion. We'll have the discussion and then vote individually. So action item B, the resolution approval of the Washington County Land and Water Resource Management Plan. Mr. Sebo, are you going to make a presentation on that?
Mr. Chairman, no, I'm not. Back in June, I made a presentation. And then in August, Supervisor Mary joined me as we presented the land and water plan in front of the Land and Water Resources Conservation Board for Department of Ag, Trade and Consumer Protection. It was well received and approved by them without any changes or recommendations. So the plan has not changed since it was actually presented to this committee in June. And that was a public hearing that we had there as well. So now it's the county's it's back on the county's table to actually move the process and get adopted by the County Board of Supervisors, and that's what this resolution does.
Any questions or discussion points? I guess I violated my own rule. We should have a motion to accept and a second first, and then we'll go to discussion. A motion to accept, please. Is there a second? Supervisor Schultes. Without any further discussion, thank you, Mr. Sebo.
Thank you.
It was an interesting day that day we spent talking. We also talked about Winnebago County, which is my hometown and my home area, and it was interesting to talk about some of the conservation practices up there. So we'll vote to approve. All in favor, say aye. Opposed? Let's move on to action item number B, the budget transfer Gulf County free golf course freezer. Now, this time we'll start out with a motion to approve and a second, and then we'll have discussion. Is there a motion to approve, please? Supervisor Boltman, seconded by Supervisor Gallitz. Jamie, you want to talk about this? We're going to get a new freezer?
Just really quick on process, because this is the first of these that you're seeing. So you are the legislative body and you hold certain purse string approvals over our budget after it's approved. One of those is related to large scale purchases. This item was not budgeted. However, and that's why I put the handout on your desk. It's 25 years old. It is currently, the compressor is broken. And so we are also taking a look at making sure we're funding things this year that need to be replaced. So I'm happy to answer any questions, but the golf course is in a position to afford this, and we believe we need to move forward with the purchase.
Any other questions or discussion? Supervisor Gallantz?
Thank you, Chair. Jamie, my only question was if we knew that this was failing over years per the notes, why wasn't it on a CIP?
We actually did talk about this item. I think it was too small to get on our radar as it relates to that. And we had previously talked about it. That Dave Yankee, who's the park superintendent, likes to try to repair things when he can. And so I think it wasn't something we probably would have put it in the upcoming budget as a more of an operating item versus a huge, large scale capital item. However, it's broke now and the year is good. So we just want to get it taken.
Sure,
care of.
I don't
Yeah.
dispute replacing it, needs to be,
Yeah.
but I'm just curious, does that cause us to look at all of our equipment, especially since we're depreciating this over 10 years, I think?
It actually was in the CIP under the kitchen remodel. If you can recall back to the planning that we had done with the clubhouse,
Mhm.
there was roughly $25,000 in the plan, which they were calling kind of a clubhouse kitchen upgrade. This was a component of that. However, because the compressor actually failed, they're just recommending we do this piece of it now.
Thank you.
Any other questions or discussion? If not, we'll move to a vote. All in favor of proceeding with the purchase of the golf course freezer, say aye. Opposed? Action item D, the 2021 Land Information Office budget. Is there a motion to accept? And then and a second, then we'll proceed with discussion. Supervisor Schulteis? Supervisor Gallantz? Yes, sir.
I don't have
Presentation.
any prepared presentation for it. You have the handout. I'm happy to answer any questions you have about the land information program in general, or more specifically, the recommended budget for 2021.
I have no questions. Anybody, other supervisors? Supervisor Gallantz?
Yes, sorry, I'm trying to make sense of my notes here. Oh, no wonder why it did autocorrect me. So we currently have a fund balance, correct?
That is
So
correct.
what is that generally used for? Because it looks like we're also going to be adding to that about 45K, is that right?
Yeah, so the money that's collected through the land information program, which is a state set fee on all real estate documents that are recorded in the Registry of Deeds office. The very nature of the projects that are funded with that fee, sometimes they're very large projects, like we did a floodplain mapping project that was several $100,000. We did a datum conversion project, monument maintenance, that sort of thing, which was also several $100,000. So it's common to have some years where the budget actually, the expenses exceed revenue. And then you have other years where the revenue exceeds expenses. So this is one of those years where revenue does exceed expenses. What'll happen next year is the county will be required to update its land information plan. That land information plan will be developed by me as a land information officer, as well as our land information council. And then it'll come to this committee for approval. And it would be the place in that plan to more specifically define what the goals are for that fund balance for the next 3 years.
So the potential expenses, I think that's what it's a placeholder for. Would that be services, professional services outside of the county?
Yes, but typically in the way of data acquisition projects. So, for example, the last time we flew LiDAR, which is it's a way to map elevations in a county, so contour mapping, that sort of thing. The last time we did that for the county was in 2015. We would expect to do that probably again in 2025. So we would hire a company to do that, and that would include the professional services to actually develop the data. But in addition to that, it would include the airplane that they put in the air and the technology that they have to actually acquire that data. So yeah, there are some professional services, some consulting projects, floodplain mapping, engineering, for example, some surveying work that does get paid out of there, in addition to the staff support that the county funds.
Thank you.
Any other question or discussion points? If not, then we entertain a vote, please, to accept the budget and land information office budget as presented. All in favor, say aye. Opposed? Thank you, sir.
All right, thank you. Have a good day.
We'll move on to action item C, the 2021 Register of Deeds Office Budget. And entertain a motion to accept the budget as presented, then we'll have discussion. Is there a second? I'm sorry, a motion and a second? Supervisor Boltman, Supervisor Schulteis, Ms. Martin.
I'll be happy to answer any questions for you.
Any question to our registrar of deeds? Yes, sir. Supervisor.
Thank you.
I sent a note to our registrar yesterday and with the same comment, really nothing stands out. It looks like, as again, this office with so many of the offices of Washington County this year, a unique situation where we have to deal with the public on a daily basis. We've had people working from remote locations and we made it work. And thank you, Sharon, and your group, and really to all the offices in the county for making it work this year. For the most part, I think the citizens of the county have seen a seamless change from the remote situation to actually coming into the physical office. I know many of the offices have been occupied with staff on a regular and daily basis, and I commend everybody. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and I'll share that with my staff.
Please do. Please do. Vote please on the acceptance of the Register of Deeds Office budget for 2021. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Passed. We'll move on to item number F, the 2021 UW Extension Department budget. Is there a motion to accept the budget as presented, please? Supervisor Gallitz, Supervisor Boltman. Cindy, your presentation, any discussion points you want to make here before if there's any other discussion questions, I guess.
Well, you'll note that we came in under the levy target, and that's due to we had a retirement full-time person, so we are hiring for a part-time person, so that salary. So that's really it. Do you have any other questions?
I guess I have a question regarding your staff now is mostly back in at work now.
They come in maybe 1 day a week.
Okay, so it's still an off and on.
We are all telecommuting the state. Yes.
All right, all right. Again, thank you for the work you guys done remotely. I know you've had some real challenges as well as many of your programs have been dramatically curtailed. because of the restrictions that have been put in place. But again, a job well done. Thank you to all of you.
I'll let them know. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions, Supervisor Gallants?
Yeah, regarding the FTE that you mentioned going to 0.7, so that's the 4-H position, right?
Support staff. for
Yeah,
the
support,
4-H.
support staff. So is the necessary support less than
No.
what it has been?
This position will assist the 4-H program as well as the community and economic development position. The full-time person we have in the staff is my point person for like case manager stuff, but that person also works with 4-H. So we're kind of dividing the duties.
Okay, so I guess split between departments that the person is.
Mhm.
So you're taking 0.7 and the other department's taking 0.3 in their budget?
No. Um, We have one full-time staff and now we'll have 3 part-time staff. I looked at, and I worked with the educators and really looked at what was essential. And we looked at the job duties. Once the other person retired, which was a full-time person, we really looked at that. And we realized that we could have a 0.7 instead of a full-time person. No, there's nothing that was cut out, I mean, of the responsibilities.
Okay. Okay. And then looking at the budget, I think the reason under I'm trying to pull up the actual budget, but the personnel expense under the community section, because we had a vacancy for a while there, right? Meaning the incurred expense in under community and development educator.
And we haven't had a vacancy, that's
Okay.
all.
So we had, original budget was 71, total estimate 57.
That's because that full-time position was under Paul, the community developments. What do you call it, Margie? Yeah, she was
Cost center.
underneath
Yeah.
that, whatever it's, cost center, yep. So
Okay.
she's the one that retired.
So the 2021 budget, that's for that actual position then.
0.7, part of that 0.7. Mhm.
Thank you.
Other questions? Thank you, Cindy.
Thank you.
We'll vote then to accept the UW Extension Department budget as presented. All in favor, say aye. Opposed? Then we'll move on to the 2021 Planning and Parks Division Department budgets. Do you want to do these one at a time, Jamie, or just want to do as a group, or if anybody has questions? I have some questions as well. but
Yes,
we'll
I
get-
don't have a presentation planned. I will say that as it relates to parks, it's a fairly exciting budget, being the first where we are not support maintenance and improvements are not supported by the tax levy. So we do have some revenue streams within that budget supporting them. But that was exciting. I will also comment that it was a pleasure to prepare the Washington County Golf Course budget this year. We were in a position to prepare that budget similar to how we had prepared the 2020 budget, not necessarily depending on some of the increased usage that we're seeing in the current year. And it made the budget relatively easy to put together because of how the golf course is performing and the planning that we've done out there. And as it relates to the remaining land resources budget, I think that it's a budget that is really well done. I think it's really thought out. It's something we've been working towards for a long time. And I'm proud of what the recommendation says and the direction that we're heading as a department. And I'd be happy to, as well as my staff, Deb Zilski, Paul Sebo, Eric are here, and we can answer any questions that you might have about what's contained within the budgets.
Did we get a motion to discuss this? I can't remember. All right. We need a motion to open the discussion on this. I'm sorry, get ahead of myself. All right, a second, please. Supervisor Boltman. Yes, sir, Supervisor Gallants.
I didn't see exactly where the 0.67 FTE reduction is coming from, but where is that? And
In parks.
yeah,
I don't exactly know the answer to that. Margie, would you like to reply?
So Parks is a department that has seasonal employees. How we budget those is there's just a pot of money. That pot of money is then used to cover a certain number of seasonal hours. So we calculate an FTE, an FTE is based on an estimated 2,080 hours a year. So we take that bucket of money that the department is budgeting, divide it out by that average rate for a seasonal employee to get to how many hours that would cover, divide that by the 2080 to get an estimated FTE. So really all that's kind of happening is either we budget a little bit less in that pool of money for the seasonals, or the average rate has increased, which then of course on the math side decreases the number of hours. So it's not an actual cut in employees. It's more of just how the FTE calculations occur.
The other thing we did have happen is one of those seasonal roles in this budget shifted to a LTE cleaning role, which is paid at more of a custodial rate, which is a little bit higher than the seasonal rate of $10 to $12. So you may be seeing those rate increases reflected in the total number. However, we don't expect that to negatively impact the number of seasonals we bring forward next year.
thank you.
I have a question. I believe it's on page 56, under the land conservation revenues and other sources. I believe it's page 56. At the very top, it says public charges for services, $10,000, going up to 21 of $20,000. What is that?
I'm going to deflect this question to Mr. Sebo.
Paul, can you answer that?
Yes, and hopefully you've heard me talk, or at least it's seen in some of the reports, the regional conservation partnership that we have with Milwaukee Metropolitan Sewage District. They have applied for grants, and it was a FICA program that we were focusing in on the Cedar Creek watershed. MMSD, Milwaukee Metropolitan Sewage District, applied for other grants, Fund for Lake Michigan, National Fish and Wildlife Foundation. They received grants, and they have been giving us, Washington County, $10,000 to help our staff focus on that Cedar Creek watershed. And that's also kind of what brought up the Cedar Creek Farmer Group and everything else. So that program is ending, or it's ending this year, but the money is running out. But they applied for now another regional conservation partnership program that covers all of the Milwaukee River watershed. So that's the entire east half of the county, a little bit more than half the county. And that dollar is switching from $10,000 a year. We're able to actually recoup for staff time up to $20,000. So that's kind of in that bucket of public charges, and why it increased from 10,000 up to 20.
Thank you for clarifying. Thank you.
Hey, can I just add something that the county executive asked me to point out to this group? And maybe Supervisor Galitz will remember this. But when we brought on the grant funded conservation technician position, it was subject to the fact that it was grant funded in the FTE count. That grant is technically, there are other grant sources going up, but the grant funding that person is ending in 2021. And there is a portion of non-grant funds, a small amount, that will support that position in 2021. We're going to have to take a look at what happens in 2022. However, he wanted to point that out because we're just short of having it fully grant funded. So we put the position in for the full year. But that was a commitment that was made to the county board that when that grant funding expires, the position goes away. So that's why it was just it's just short. And so we were comfortable including that revenue for the duration of 2021. That is pointed out in the highlights, and that's why that was pointed out.
Another question, Paul, and I believe this is on page 57, revenue and other sources. We have here land use, other revenues of 122,000 and LWCD revenues of I guess that's part of the same thing. Is this something above and beyond typical, or is this something new, or is this just a breakout of what's been happening in the past?
No, it's the same. It's actually our permit revenue and staff time. So when, especially in the land conservation side, when we issue an erosion control stormwater permit, we charge per hour all the time that we are involved in that project. So that whole bucket is really the revenue from the permits. Unless I'm reading misunderstanding.
I think, is your question about the other revenues, 122,051?
Yes.
That amount was, so previously, we had been working on a different plan for different but similar plan to reorganizing this area. And at that time, we had asked the county board for a general fund transfer to fund a bridge position for succession planning. In doing that, what we did last year in the budget was we basically budgeted the expense of the bridge position, which we never filled, so it was a vacant position. And then we also budgeted the revenue, which was a pot directly out of the general fund, so that it wouldn't impact the annual levy. So this year, you're seeing that come out of the budget, but it's really an accounting mechanism for that general fund transfer that was made. That's a little confusing. Margie, do you have any?
It was a one-time funding source approved in 20 with the use of general funds. That one-time source is no longer available in 21, so it's not in the budget.
Okay.
We can talk through what happened there if that's, because were you on the board when you?
No. I don't recall seeing this before, but I'm fully accepting the answers I've been given. this
Yeah,
morning,
okay.
so.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments regarding any of the planning and park department budgets?
Thank you. Thank you,
Supervisor
Chair.
Gallons.
Oh, sorry. Thank you. I've noticed in the, most of the budgets here this morning, interdepartmental charges, and I believe some comments or notes were regarding to increased costs from IT. What's driving that?
IT.
Oh, I get that.
IT,
Margie?
IT has some increased costs overall. There's been a few things that have come to the committee and the board in relation to security initiatives. Those items have ongoing operational costs. The way the IT fund is structured, it's an internal service fund, meaning it kind of operates as a business, but its customers are the county departments. So any costs that they have are covered through a charge to those other user departments. So as their costs increase, their budgets, that kind of then trickles out to all the other departments that use them. So.
There's a presentation we had, I don't know, in the last 6 or 12 months, talked about enhancements to malware detection and all that. So that's cost on.
Correct.
And I will add that ours saw an increase probably even above and beyond, because for the first time this year, IT charged those allocations out and considered whether you were a static device, a mobile device, or an iPad. And our team has a lot of mobile devices. We work around a lot of different places. And so we saw an increase in our allocations based on the fact that we are using more remote devices.
Basically, those charges though are all internal, such that it's a transfer of funds
Yes.
within the county.
Correct. Yes.
Right. And
Yes, sir.
one last question. So under the planning and conservation division budget, specifically county communications. Oh, no, I take that back. Under land use zoning, there's an interdepartmental charge. So 2019 was 30,000. 2020 budget was 127,000, but actual is only 17. So 2021 is 18,000. I don't remember what drove that placeholder of 127,000 if the previous year was only 30 and actual is only 17. I'm just trying to remember what that was.
Which cost center are you looking at?
This is under 2802002 land use zoning. interdepartmental charges. 2020 original budget was 127,000, but incurred or estimate is only 17,000.
That line item included that vacant position expense that we had just talked about with the
Yes,
revenues.
sorry, the succession planning piece.
Yes.
All right, that's right. That would make sense. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments from the supervisors or from the audience? Then we would vote to approve the 2021 Planning and Parks Department budgets. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Then they are passed and moving on. Our next meeting date will be at 6 PM in the evening on Thursday, October 22. Again, that will be the public hearing on the, let's go back here. This is on chapter 270, no. That's the hearing on a chapter 275. Was that correct, Jamie?
Yes.
All right. 6 PM on October 22nd. With that, we'll declare this this meeting adjourned. Thank you. Too much politics, this convention.